Why do we carry flashlights?
Bro, there are streetlights everywhere. You live in the city. What are you talking about? You don't need a flashlight anymore.
More lumens isn't always better.
It's 12,000 lumens, but then after 30 seconds, it's gonna drop to 200.
It always comes down to what is good for me.
Nah, bro, it's what Instagram says is the best flashlight.
Okay. What's up, everyone? Welcome to Carry the Way, the weekly podcast where we nerd out about all things EDC gear and maybe try to teach you a thing or two while we're at it. I'm Bernard, the founder of EVERYDAYCARRY.com, and I'm joined by our editor, Mikey.
Hey, what's up?
So by the time this episode airs, daylight savings would have ended here in the States. That means shorter days and longer, darker nights. It's also when temperatures start to dip, meaning we get a pocket space buff as we wear jackets more often. So it's just a perfect time to consider how a flashlight factors into your everyday carry. And like with literally any other hobby, there's a deep rabbit hole when it comes to flashlights. So in today's episode, we'll touch on some of the flashlight fundamentals, more popular mainstream options, and then do a deeper dive into the more enthusiast flashlight meta. But first, let's do a little Q&A with some of our listeners. We put out a poll on Instagram a little while ago, and people had some questions, so let's give it a shot. Starting with the first one. Gurgly Fisil asks, best EDC knife for left hand. I'm assuming they mean like left-handed people.
Yes.
This is your forte, Mikey, so I'll let you take
Anything with a crossbar lock, pretty much. So access locks from Benchmade, Able lock from Hogue, most things from Vosteed, pretty much anything that lets you operate the lock from either hand and it has a reversible clip. My recommendation is my current favorite, the Vosteed Raccoon, but the Benchmade is also one of my favorites, which is like a timeless pick. Do you have a particular crossbar lock that you like?
No, I was going to say basically what you said. I'm holding up to the camera. I got a Hogue Deca here and a Kaiser Drop Bear. Both of these you can see because of the crossbar lock and the dual thumb studs and the reversible clip basically means they're ambidextrous. So it's not specifically for left-handers, but these style of knives are just very popular anyway these days. So I wouldn't worry too much if you're like a left-handed person. You have really solid options if you go for something more ambidextrous.
And even if you go for stuff like liner locks or button locks, it's still operable left-handed, but the crossbar lock is still the ideal. It also gives you like good options for handling the knife itself, because if you operate the crossbar lock, your fingers aren't in the way of a lock, for example. So it's a little bit safer there. So there's some benefits to it, even without the handedness factored into it. But yeah, crossbar locks, really good.
Next question. Central Coast Art asks, do you have a EDC pouch recommendation? For me personally, I just use an alpaca hub pouch. It's like a little guy. It is kind of expensive for what it is, but it's like good materials from a good brand, has a decent organization. It's still, I think, under $50, maybe around $30. And it's just, something to try out. Otherwise, like I would recommend some of the OGs like Maxpedition or Vanquest, just to like give you a baseline familiarity with a pouch organizer. I think pouch organizers are kind of polarizing in just what they do. Some people really want all their gear to be clipped to a pocket, super readily accessible, whereas other people don't need things at the ready like that. So they'll throw everything into an EDC pouch and then they have a grab and go consolidated option. And that's just a more of a convenience factor.
I have a couple more picks. Garage Built Gear is kind of like the prototype for it, but they are on a drop system, so it might not be readily accessible. There are a couple of other affordable ones. I like Viperade, has a nice set of caddy style pouches. They have some zip stuff too, but they have a nice set of different sizes and different categories for their stuff. That's the Viperade. I have owned a bunch from Etsy. There's one called Leetweed from Etsy that I've used. She's out of Ukraine. She makes canvas caddies in the style where it's kind of like a slip thing where you can have a knife and a pen and right on the outside of the pouch, but it has a zip compartment also. So yeah, those are my recommendations for that.
Nice. Good mix of options there. So,
Mhm.
um, next question, King Detritus asks, "What is your carry when a knife isn't allowed to pass through?"
The
Dude, these
TSA, I
days,
assume.
nothing, bro. No, it's not even just like when you're traveling with TSA. Like, if you're going into any venue, like for an event, sporting event, like concert, anything, like they are so strict too. I've had to take my tiny Swiss Army knife off my keychain, and it's kind of annoying. Like you have to go all the way back to parking. I know it's like a first world problem, but these days, like I don't expect that I'm going to be opening packaging at a concert or anything. So I just leave it. I just leave it in the car. That's
Mhm.
maybe like a car culture type thing. But if you're out in the city, I don't know. Uh, it's just frustrating because like granted, it's been a while since I did any kind of research on this sort of thing because with COVID, we weren't really traveling as much. But before that, you had like Leatherman style PS, Gerber dime travel. I think those were like two solid picks, and they're both discontinued now. So I don't know, Mikey. Have
Unless
you like
unless
found
you
anything?
unless you like mod them yourself and remove the
Mm-hmm.
blades. I don't really want to recommend a pry bar because that's not really the purpose of it. The best thing I can think of is the Victorinox Jet Setter, which is just a pair of scissors, and it has a combo tool where it has like a tiny Phillips screwdriver at the end of it and a bottle cap opener. But I've heard that some planes or some airlines don't even allow the scissors. They're like too sharp or something. So I don't know. Just
Good
chuck it in
luck,
or leave it
bro.
at home. I don't
Yeah,
know. Yeah.
yeah,
Good luck. Good luck.
yeah.
Good luck at that one. Let us know. Let us
Yeah,
know if
seriously.
you had if you have a tool that gets past TSA or international flights. We'd really be curious to know.
Yeah. Okay, so two people asked if we would carry the Leatherman Arc.
It's not even a question. I already carry it. I
Yeah.
carry a multi tool primarily over a dedicated knife. So it's either my T4, which is the smaller version of the old Free series, or the new Arc, which replaces my P4. Are you carrying yours at the moment?
I mean, I have it in my little valet tray. I'm looking over it right now, and it
Mhm.
is like the currently rotated one. But I just don't carry a full size multi tool like that very often for what I need. I
Mhm.
would just prefer a dedicated knife.
Sure.
That's just like thinner and easier to use. And even before the arc, I was more of like a free P2 kind of guy, like the one layer thinner, because I
Mhm.
don't need like saws and stuff in my EDC.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
I will
Um,
admittedly say that I'm carrying it for the purposes of testing it and just seeing how I like it.
sure.
But it's as close as possible to the P4. It's exactly the same weight, so it's not really much of a difference with how I've been testing it. So I generally gravitate like you to smaller stuff, like a smaller Victorinox or the smaller T4. But yeah, I do like carrying it. It's really nice. It's just nice. I just like looking at it. I don't know
Yeah.
if it's just like the hype thing or it's just I just
Yeah.
like having it on
I
hand.
think we need more hours like of testing behind it and
Mhm.
just
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, solidify our thoughts there. Cool. So let's just fly through a few more questions. C. Kerp Hudson asked, "What is a good beginner watch for your collection?"
Whew.
Yeah, I'm okay. So I'm gonna say if you can find it for around $100, Seiko SNX S79. I've like made a video on this and
Perfect.
it's been viral. Uh, I think it's just a great entry level automatic watch with date, loom, dressy-ish looks, but still kind of sporty. Not the
Mhm.
most water resistance or anything, but it's a good entry level at around 100-ish dollars, a little bit more maybe because of the hype, but a good entry level option for a mechanical automatic watch from a trusted brand that
Mhm.
is going to be comfortable, not too big, and have all the functionality you would probably want in a basic beginner watch.
Everybody should try a Seiko. Honestly, it's one of the best places to start if you're getting into watches, especially dipping your toes in automatics. And that's a great one. Like you said, your video for it went viral, and I really like that one. That's a really good one.
Yeah, I will say if you ask like watch collectors, I mean, I am one, but like the watch nerd guys, they might say, "Oh, just get like a Casio or a G-Shock or like a Casio Duro or like the actual digital display ones.
Mm.
It's the
Those three would have been my
F91W,
picks.
right?
Yeah.
Or just like a G-Shock Square. but I think you kind of miss out on sort of the magic of mechanical wristwatches, just like an
Mm.
automatic movement. I think that's a big part of, for a lot of watch collectors, that journey is like um, going back to that sort of mechanical
Yeah,
appeal.
like I
Yeah.
said in last week's episode, my love of watches started with a Seiko automatic, the first one I got, and it turned out to be my grill in the end. So part of the journey is finding out in the end that it was at the start all along. So yeah, I would recommend
Hmm.
Seiko. Try it, worth it.
Thank you for sending in questions, everybody. I thought that was pretty cool. And if you have more, I'll show you how to do that at the end of this episode. Last question: what are you carrying in terms of flashlights today,
Ooh,
Mikey?
on topic. I am
Yeah.
testing out the Streamlight Wedge XT. So they came out with an older version of this. I think it was 2 years ago. The Wedge, which had a fancy rotary type switch, but they also came out with this one last year. It was the smaller one. It's USB charging. There's a USB port here at the back, and it's a nice little tactical light. It's perfectly like fist carry.
Yeah, that
It's
fits
very
like pretty well for you.
yeah, pretty. It's. I thought I wouldn't like it so much because it felt like a downgrade of the old one, but it actually turned out to be really handy. This form factor is really addicting to hold, and it has a nice clip. It's very slim. It's very low profile. Really like it. USB-C charging. And it's fairly bright. I mean, it's bright enough for most users. So this is what I have on me these days.
So honestly, for me, nobody asked, nobody cares, but I still like keychain lights, and I think it's just because I haven't found a pocket flashlight that I enjoy the form factor of yet. And I can talk a little bit about that later. But I'm
Mm,
carrying just, and I have been for many years, just some kind of Rovivon keychain
mm.
flashlight. I'm not using this particular one. This is the A3 Aurora. Show it up to the camera real quick. It's the A3 Aurora in the MAO marble gray accent, but mine is just like a stainless steel version on my keychain. And it's
Weren't
just, yeah, go ahead.
you were the one who brought like the Rovivan Aurora as a series to our attention, I think. You were the one who discovered them. And they just went crazy. I think this was around 2019, 2020. And then they just started making tons of them,
Oh,
like
yeah.
nonstop.
Yeah. I actually liked them so much that I did like a full YouTube review.
Mm,
Yeah. But at the time, it was because they had side lights, a glow in the dark body, I think USB recharging,
mm,
and I think Nichia 219C
mm.
options. So, and it was all in a very small, lightweight package. And I
And
valued a lot of
affordable
that
too.
stuff. And it's pretty affordable. Yeah. Anyway, why do we carry flashlights? This is the first sort of question that I think we need to establish. Why carry
Mm.
a dedicated flashlight versus using the one on your phone or just raw dogging darkness every day?
I think I mentioned this in an earlier episode where I use an example of you would carry an umbrella for a 50% chance of rain, but it's dark every single day 100% of the time. So why wouldn't you carry a dedicated tool that can address that issue? And of course, people are going to say, I can hear them in the comments, they're going to
Mm.
say, bro, there are streetlights everywhere, you live in the city, what are you talking about? There's like lamps and streetlights and everything, you don't need a flashlight anymore. And I'm like, but not always, not everywhere, not for everybody. So there's an argument to be made there, I think.
Yeah,
What
and
about you?
even if there are streetlights everywhere, what happens if they just don't turn on that night? I've had that happen where like the normal streetlight around the corner in my neighborhood when I'm like walking my dog or whatever, it's just
Mm,
like been out. It's
yeah,
kind of sketch sometimes, and you just feel better having a flashlight. I would also
yeah.
argue for some people in urban environments, there there is a bunch of light, yes, but it's kind of like low quality light that you don't have control over, that maybe cast shadows in certain ways, and just having a flashlight gives you a little bit more control over that situation. And if you're kind of out in the countryside where there's just like no light pollution and you can just adjust your eyes to the ambient light of the stars, then yeah, you're probably fine, honestly.
Yeah. And even if there are like street lights, your example of walking a dog is perfect because that can't illuminate everything. You wouldn't see like doo doo on the sidewalk, for example. I've
Yeah.
had that problem where there were street lights in my area, and then this random black patch on the ground didn't look like anything, but oops, I stepped on it. It wasn't
Oh,
what I thought it
damn.
was. Oh no. So having a bit more power, a bit more focused light that's in front of you and you can control, like you said, I think it's, that in itself is worth the price of carrying one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what about the smartphone argument? Like every phone has a flashlight now.
Yeah, but is it really that powerful even at the highest setting? It's not. You can just do it side by side. I can turn on my flashlight right now. So let me do a quick demonstration. This is my flashlight at the brightest level, but then this is the starting point of my pocket flashlight
Yeah.
and it doesn't take up much space in my pocket. So not even a comparison there, I think.
I would argue that is it even about just maximum brightness? I don't think so. For me
No.
personally, no. But so I will admit, sometimes I just use my phone flashlight because it's the most convenient at the time. And
Mhm.
it's not like it's
Agreed.
useless. It does get the job done. I don't want to discount smartphone flashlights in that way. Like it's the
Yeah.
more flashlights you have, the better in my book. I think that's cool. Yeah, right.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I think it's just like it's still a viable
Oh,
option.
I have one very interesting fact that I discovered very recently. Did you know that we'll get into this deeper later into the show, but did you know that the CRI of your phone is about as close to 100 as you could get?
No way.
Did you know
It
that?
makes sense
Yeah, it
though,
is.
because it's also like a photo
Yeah.
flash, right?
Yeah, that's right. So, among even the most enthusiast of all flashlights, your phone flashlight is as close to 100% CRI as can be, or if not perfectly 100 CRI. I found that so interesting. I'm like, wait a minute, that's pretty cool. So there is an argument for smartphone flashlights, but like you said, why not have more, right? Why not have the best of? Why not have one in your pocket and have
Yeah.
one a dedicated tool that's more focused for
That's
tasking?
a great factoid. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure like three people in our audience are like sick 100 CRI, whereas the rest of them might not know what that is. So I think we should take
Mm,
just a few minutes to describe some basic terminology or functionality or features that are common amongst EDC flashlights that everyone should sort of know, whether it's to help them, make a purchase decision or just to better appreciate what the higher end or more
let's do it.
enthusiast flashlights might offer. And when I think about
Mm.
this, I don't want to make it too complicated. Even though we did get some feedback earlier, there people are like, "Great episode. When are you going to do non-beginner stuff?" Today is that day, but not quite yet.
Strap
Yeah, I know.
in.
Let's do a little bit, some beginner flashlight stuff, some flashlight fundamentals. I think
Mm.
what people should know generally are just like battery configuration, lumens, or just like output, and then user interface. Thoughts?
Battery type is the first question I ask after budget if somebody asks me about a
Fair.
flashlight recommendation. And there's two big reasons for that. One is because I actually don't like recommending rechargeable flashlights, and there's a good reason for that. So everybody should be familiar with lithium ion batteries, right? They're the ones used in flashlights, they're the ones used in your laptop. Pretty much everything that recharges over USB or has some rechargeable, even your electric vehicle, would be using lithium ion. So they still make batteries that are plain lithium primaries, as they call them. These come in a bunch of form factors, anywhere from AA, AAA, and my favorite one, which is CR123. It used to be a popular battery for
Mhm.
cameras, for camera
That's right.
flashes, but it's also transitioned into vapes. It's also transitioned into flashlights, especially. And the reason I like recommending lithium batteries is, number one, they are easier to find than I mean, they are still easy to find. You can still find them in hardware stores, you can still find them in grocery checkouts even. And number two, the longevity and the safety. um and what I mean by that is lithium batteries have a 10-year at least shelf life, and which makes them great for having something stored in like an emergency kit, in your bug out bag. They can even be in your car as an emergency, because a normal lithium ion battery would discharge, especially in hot temperatures, like in your car, for example. So lithium primary batteries make a great alternative for backups and for and for longevity. It doesn't drain as long, and it's also very safe for extreme temperatures. So that's why I like that type of battery. But of course, the most convenient thing for a modern EDC flashlight would still be USB rechargeable with lithium ion. I think that's still the most popular. It also saves a lot more space because the battery cell itself takes up a lot of space in the flashlight. So that lets you have like your Rovivon keychain lights to be as small as they are because it's using a built-in specially sized lithium
Right.
ion battery.
So
Yeah.
there was a lot there. I'm sure some of our listeners like, how did this dude just talk about batteries for that long? But I
Yeah.
want to try to just uh, recap that a little bit to make sure that I
Mm.
understand and the readers understand. So there's a difference between lithium primary, which are
Mm.
lithium chemistry based batteries that are not rechargeable, but
Yes, they're
they
disposable.
yes they're not rechargeable, but they are safer and perform well. Is that correct? And
Hmm.
store they last long,
For a
yeah,
much
for
longer
a
time.
longer
Yeah.
time if you're not using them, and they don't drain over time. And then there's
Hmm.
maybe lithium ion, which is the rechargeable stuff that we're more familiar with, like the one in our phones. And those are a little bit more complicated, and they require a bit more, I don't know, understanding. It's just like a little bit more involved because they're a little bit more complex and there is a risk of voltage. I don't know.
Yeah. Lithium ion generally has a higher voltage, which some flashlights may not be compatible with. And there's also the parasitic drain, where even if you're not using it, it decreases its capacity over time. So you may find that if you have a rechargeable flashlight you haven't charged in a few months, you left it in your car and you tried using it, it might be dead when you start it up versus something
Yeah.
like using lithium primaries. Yeah.
Okay. So I think the last thing I will say on lithium ion is like they can be simpler or more complex depending on how you want to take them. So you can smooth brain and just get something that you plug in a USB-C thing and it recharges, or you can get really nerdy about the exact battery you use to get certain results or performance that you want. And I think lithium
Hmm.
ion has a place for that. And you're recommending lithium primaries as this kind of middle ground of it works well and it's safe, so you kind of get the benefits of performance without the complexity or potential risk of the more rechargeable stuff, if you're willing to just buy into something that is disposable and not rechargeable.
And one last thing, lithium primaries also have a much higher capacity.
Oh,
So
yes.
which means longer runtime also for flashlights specifically. So another fringe benefit, but
Mhm.
big benefit nonetheless. Yeah.
We haven't gone to anything else yet, but one more thing on
Woo!
batteries. Yeah,
I told them to strap
yeah.
in. We're gonna get
He's
nerdy.
getting
Yeah.
carried away. He said the podcast name.
Oh no.
Yeah, so let me bring this back. One last thing, because I think it is important, even for beginners who might never touch this. But when I talked about, or when I think of battery configuration, I think people might remember, say, for example, old mag lights that you would put
Ooh, yeah.
4D cell batteries into this giant shaft, and that's how it worked. And you just had to like,
Oh no.
yeah, and you just like had to remember the orientation of the batteries so that, you know, like the little flat side is on one side and the little nub is on the other side. And there is some concern when it comes to these lithium ion batteries that we're talking about, putting them into these flashlights, especially if there's room or the ability to put more than one battery in there. Because if you do it incorrectly, it can be very dangerous.
Mm.
So that's,
Mismatched
yeah.
mismatched brands, mismatched voltages, mismatched like types of batteries can cause a short, and that might be bad in an electronic device with chemistry
Mhm.
and possible explosive ramifications inside of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that might be more of like the enthusiast discussion later on. But I just wanted the
Mhm.
very beginning of the episode kind of bring that to the forefront just so that people have that in mind. Not everyone's gonna like mess with that kind of stuff, and I personally don't even own any two cell battery or two cell flashlights
Yeah, me
anymore. I don't
neither.
think.
Yeah.
And I think the industry is kind of moving away from them. I could be wrong.
And they're starting to make much bigger battery cells. I'll show one later where
Mhm.
the 21700 battery is gigantic. It's like two D cells on top of each other. So the capacity and the form factor is already there. So you don't have to risk anymore in that kind of form factor trying to mix and match lithium ion batteries. So yeah, so there have been
Okay,
improvements there.
so now we've gotten past batteries. What else is there?
Woo! We got it.
So now that you can safely put something into this thing to turn it on, and you turn it on, what do you get? You get output. So it's like how bright the beam of a flashlight is. Um,
Hmm.
and there's so much you could say about just the beam of a flashlight, but I think what most people care about is brightness. And that is measured most
Hmm.
commonly in the unit of lumens, right?
Hmm.
And I would say, do you happen to know like how bright in lumens the phone flashlight is, just for comparison?
Oh god, I'm gonna get this wrong. I'm guessing about 30 to 50 lumens.
I was going to guess around that
Yeah,
as well,
it feels like
which is
30 to 50 lumens.
yeah, which is about like a low or medium mode for more enthusiast or dedicated flashlights.
Hmm.
And then they can go, you can see them being advertised up to like 12,000 lumens or
Yeah,
something.
it's a very big
Um,
marketing point. It's
yeah.
there's been like a lumen war in the past few years, but the manufacturers have kind of calmed down on that kind of marketing to make it more accurate and leaning more towards the enthusiast tint side and other features. But yeah, there was a whole time where everybody was just chasing the more lumens, brightest flashlight in the world, and yeah, that was interesting for a while.
Well, I'm glad we're out of the lumen creep meta and we're
Yes.
now looking at other things. I will say, for me personally, I think maybe this is a hot take, but I think for most people, like 100 lumens is plenty.
Oh
That's
yeah.
probably like, this is a really old flashlight. This is an EagleTac D25C titanium.
Ooh, classic.
Yeah, this beat to hell. Very old, but this thing is not doing 1,000 lumens, like nowhere close to that.
Mhm.
But this was my EDC in my pocket every day, and I'm still here. So, like,
The
I survived.
I have some flashlights that have displays on them to let you know exactly if I forget how many lumens a flashlight has, it shows what lumens are being used. I'm generally like one of the night core ones.
Yeah.
Anything with a night core with an OLED is pretty nice, but we'll get to that later. I've discovered that anywhere between 50 and 75 is plenty. 100 is kind of pushing it,
Hmm.
especially if it's like super dark and your eyes aren't adjusted. 100 lumens will still blind you if you flash it against the wall and your eyes are
Yeah.
completely acclimated to the dark. 100 lumens is plenty. So anywhere between 60 and 75 is a nice sweet spot for walking the dog or for picking up your mail or like just finding your way in a dark area with like low street lamps lighting and stuff. Yeah, so it's plenty. 75 is plenty. Don't give in to the lumen hype. That's
Yeah,
the
you
lesson
don't
here.
need the lumen hype. It's kind of a novelty. I think if you have really bright flashlight, it will turn on for maybe a few seconds at that
Exactly.
brightness, and then the light, for safety reasons, will turn it down. Nobody really needs that um, in day-to-day, everyday carry use.
That's what
IMO.
the manufacturers don't usually tell you. They'll say that okay, it's 12,000 lumens, but then after 30 seconds it's going to drop to 200 because the
Mhm.
light can't keep up or the voltage isn't safe and the heat is would make the flashlight unbearable to hold for
Yeah.
more than a minute or so. So don't give into the hype. There is fun to be had with like super owning a super bright flashlight and showing off to your friends that you have like a lightsaber or a torch or like a spotlight that can go in like pointing into the
Yeah.
moon and stuff. It's fun for the first few times you get it, but after a while it's like uh yeah, something more usable. You'll start to appreciate the lower lumens more as you go along, I think.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I did want to say something that I look for personally in flashlights is a firefly or moonlight mode, which
Yes.
is sub 1 lumen. I think that this is kind of an underrated and overlooked mode for most people, where you get something that is just barely any light. And it's when your eyes, I think, are already adjusted for, like, darkness.
Mhm.
You don't want something that's jarringly bright. Even 10 lumens can be too bright sometimes. Like say you just like wake up in the middle of the night, you need to get to the bathroom or something.
Yes.
Um,
That's exactly
and
the
you just
example I was going to use.
yeah.
10 lumens is a lot if you have people sleeping around you. And then, yeah, like you said, you need to go to the bathroom. You flash even 20 lumens, it's going to wake people up. It's that bright.
Mm,
So something with 1 lumen or less would be ideal in that situation, even like red light as an alternative.
yeah.
Yeah. So I want to demonstrate. I have a flashlight with a sublumen lowest mode. It's one of my rotary ones. I don't know if it can even, if the camera can even pick it up, but this is on. So that's
Hmm.
off. So
Yeah.
this is, camera is kind of exaggerating it, but this is less than a lumen. This is, I believe, zero point 0.5 lumen for this setting. So it goes all the way up.
That's too
So
much, bro.
yeah,
Give
that's
me
way
that
too much.
0.03 lumens.
Ooh, now you're talking.
That's what I
Point
one
zero
last
three.
benefit. Yeah, one last benefit of Moonlight mode. It's practically infinite runtime. It's going to
Mm.
last months and months
It's
if
not a
that's the
joke.
only mode you use.
Months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, months and months. The last thing I wanted to mention is user interface. Basically, how do
Ooh.
you turn on and use the light? This is probably not something you would think of, especially if you don't own or haven't bought a modern EDC flashlight yet, because you might be used to like generic cheapy ones or like old Maglite type things where it's like one button turns it on and then the same button turns it off and that's it.
And if you think
But
about it,
we
that's how
have
your
mhm,
smartphone operates also.
true, true.
Push the icon, turns on. Yeah, push the
Yeah.
icon, turns off. Yeah.
But then now we have multiple modes, um, different brightness levels, things like lockout, uh, programming stuff, memory. That's more on the enthusiast side. So I just want to mention that you might buy a light that's like really feature packed, and it's probably like an enthusiast recommendation, but then you realize like this is kind of a learning curve that I wasn't expecting, and it is sort of a hassle for me to wrestle with this UI, so I'm not going to use it as much, and then it's not as delivering as much value as a EDC purchase than you thought.
We're about to step into hot take territory because we're gonna talk about a particular interface that neither of us like, but a lot of enthusiasts do.
Mm,
So let's talk about operation. So, like Bernard said, a lot of flashlights would come with a button, like how it is on your smartphone. The one I was carrying has a what's called a rear clicky light. This is an electronic switch, but I'll show off one with a mechanical switch. But simple, press it, light turns on. Press it, light turns off. Sometimes, like in this Olight, the light is on the side, and reason for that is it saves space here in the bottom, so you don't have the switch mechanism here. The electronic switch is here on the side. Lets it operate with click. I think my battery's dead. Oh no, there we go. So that's a side operation. And then the older flashlight styles, like this one, it takes a lot of space. So this entire top part of it is the switch, but it's a mechanical clicky. I don't know if it can be picked up, but it's a mechanical switch.
mm,
Electronic switches. The difference between a mechanical and electronic is electronic switches also have a bit more parasitic drain versus a mechanical switch where, since it's mechanical, the metal touch points will actually disengage from the battery, so it's not touching the battery, therefore it's not activating it, therefore it's not using up the battery. So that's one difference between the electronic switches and the mechanical
all right,
switches.
bro.
Yeah.
Enough about the switches. What about the operation?
Yeah. So it can be very simple and it can be very complex. Personally, I like it as simple as possible. And it's not, and this isn't even the simplest thing. I am going to show you my favorite light, two versions of my favorite light. So this is what's called a rotary type configuration. It's not as popular now. It had its moment in the limelight. This is probably the peak of it. This is the Jet Beam RRT-01. And this is unique in the sense that this is the switch for it. This metal ring is what turns it on, and this is the one that turns it off. And
Yeah.
this
So
is
for
a
the people that can't
magnetic.
see, it's a ring that he's rotating, and
All right,
it's
sorry.
like
Yeah,
it's kind of like opening a faucet. It's like you twist the faucet and like water comes out. It's like you twist the ring and then light comes out.
yeah. You should watch us on YouTube and see me demonstrating this. But
Yeah.
this is my favorite by far of all time of all flashlight mechanisms because this is a special type of rotary flashlight where it's called an infinite variable brightness, because
Yes.
the ring controls how much voltage is going from the battery into the LED, which means it can infinitely give you a stepless way of dimming and brightening the light. Kind of like if you have a house with dimming lights, this is exactly the same mechanism for it. And the reason for why it's so cool is now you can dial it in specifically to exactly what you need. You don't have to be limited by a manufacturer saying you only must have 1 lumen and then 20 lumens and then 50
Right.
lumens and then 50,000 lumens, and you had no control over it. What if you accidentally left it on the brightest setting and turned it on in the middle of the night? You're screwed, right? So
Yeah,
this
yeah,
way,
yeah.
it starts from zero and it ramps infinitely to the brightest setting in this case, which is 190 lumens for this one. So this
Yeah,
is
so that
by far my
scenario,
favorite. Yeah.
the scenario you described is like when you go to a hotel and you try to take a shower and there's only freezing cold and scalding hot. I think that's a similar analogy.
Exactly. Yeah, that's perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we need more infinitely variable things in life.
I'm sad that they don't really make them anymore. They come back from time to time, but it's not like this anymore. This was probably the last one that they made in this. They made a successor to this, which isn't as good, but this is probably the last and the best one that they've made. There is a much more. I'm gonna get nerdy. There is a much more accessible enthusiast level one that I mentioned in a previous episode. This is the HDS rotary. This is kind of has been the poster child for rotary flashlights since forever, since it's one of the more expensive slash bomb proof slash premium ones. This is a big chunk of stainless steel, and this entire tail is what controls the brightness. I think it's dead. No, it's still alive. My battery for this is running out. But this entire tail section that I'm twisting now, if you can see it in the video, is what's controlling the brightness. So similar to the metal ring of the jet beam, but similar, exactly the same rotary function. But it also has a button in the top to control off and on. So that's it. Yeah.
Very cool. I'm glad you're happy with that. But personally, I don't really care about that. So let's just quickly, I want to know what would you recommend to someone who's more like me? I started out as a flashaholic, but just imagine for podcast sake, I'm a beginner and I value simplicity, convenience, and maybe this is my first light. What would you recommend as a beginner?
I would recommend an EDC Classic from the same brand as this one, Streamlight. They make, you mentioned it in a previous episode also, they make a bunch of flashlights called the macro streams or the micro streams. Very simple
Mhm.
flashlight. They have a version that's USB chargeable like this one. They also have a version that's the most popular, like one of the most popular EDC lights ever, which uses a AAA battery. And what's great about all of these, all of them are similar. They just have a simple off and on, usually one or two levels of lights, one low and one high. Pretty brain dead. Push button, light turns on.
All
Very
right.
affordable
Brain
also.
dead, I'm sold. That's exactly what I need personally.
Smooth the
Yeah,
brain. Press the
yeah,
button. Yeah.
exactly.
Re-
I don't know why, but I kind of expected you to give me an answer that was not my own answer from a previous episode. But I mean, maybe I just got it right the first time.
I
So yeah,
mean,
Streamlight MicroStream USB. I think that's a good pick.
yeah,
Um,
$12 for the 8
and
AAA and $25 for the USB. I mean, it's perfect.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So say I'm not, I'm a little bit more into EDC, and I've seen the Streamlight. I'm like, whatever, right? Then I see a bunch of these other popular brands. I
Mhm,
see Olight, I see Rovivon, maybe like Nightcore.
mhm,
What else is popular? I think those are like pretty popular right now.
mhm,
Phoenix, uh, Through Night. I mean, there's like a range, right? But I think that's like the kind of not super enthusiast yet, but still within the EDC niche and kind of popular.
mhm.
Do you have any thoughts on those? Or like, are those good for intermediate kind of beginner flashlight
I like
enjoyers?
I like to say that your pick of a Phoenix, a Nightcore, or an Olight is probably going to be better. I mean, it's probably going to be best for 99% of what you're looking for. If you like how anything from those three brands looks and it fits your budget, I say go for it. You're not going to go wrong with any of them, personally.
Then how come if you, for example, visit the flashlight subreddit, If you mention any of those brands, you get downvoted and kicked out. Okay, maybe not actually, but
Just
that
shadow ban.
those are not the brands that people are talking about on there. And I'm kind of like a casual observer of that particular board.
Mhm.
I think you're a little bit more involved in more of the flashlight enthusiast communities.
I like to
Um,
watch. Yeah.
yeah. So what is on the other side there that I'm maybe missing? Because
Oh, yeah.
I don't own a custom light. I don't own like a Hank light as they're called,
Hmm.
or like even the stuff from AliExpress
Yeah.
that people are really into and modding those. I'm not into all that. What am I missing?
So I'm guessing my personal thing about it is there's two major reasons why people have those recommendations. We're talking stuff like Workos, we're talking stuff like Sofern,
So Fern,
we're
yep,
talking
Convoy.
stuff like Convoy, exactly, and the Hank lights, which is from the MSR stuff and the Noctagon stuff. So two big
Mm,
reasons there. Number one is price. You can get a Convoy S2 with a custom interface, a more advanced interface, and it's extremely moddable, meaning you can put in your own switches, you can resize it to fit a different battery, you can put in different LEDs in it, and it comes up to like $7, I want to say,
yeah,
for
yeah.
one of those. And it's a great light. It does everything you're gonna need. It's cheap. You can buy 10 of them to strobe out your house, it's usable with very common form factors. In this case, it's either going to be 18650 lithium ion or an 1830 lithium ion. And again, very affordable. And it's a great starting point for enthusiasts. It's not the best materials. It's not the best in size. The Convoy S2 Plus in particular is particularly huge. But price, bro, it's just,
Mm,
it's so hard to beat. You're not going to win against price against stuff like Workos and Southern and yeah, Convoy, I think. So those are
okay,
the,
so
yeah,
there's like an aspect of you're just getting way better
value.
potential performance,
Mhm.
yeah, for that value. Um, you mentioned stuff like 18650 or 18350. Those are types of lithium ion batteries.
Right.
And I one thing that I see often, a criticism of the more popular lights, um, like say for example this Nikkor EDC 27, right? This is like an interesting form factor. It's kind of like a wedge shape,
Mhm.
flat flashlight. These are getting a little bit popular now. Maybe not with
Yeah, like this
enthusiasts.
one.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the one that you're carrying from Streamlight. But as far as I know, you cannot replace the battery in this as just a regular user because it's
Mhm.
not like one of those cylindrical batteries that you just like plop into a barrel.
Yeah.
And I think um, these brands that do these proprietary batteries or non-user replaceable batteries, they get a lot of flack from enthusiasts for not offering that. But then again, enthusiasts have the know-how, the tools, the patience, and the I don't know the drive to do all that. They really want to have full control of their
Mhm.
flashlight experience.
Exactly.
Whereas
Yeah.
people like me, I kind of value simplicity, and I am a modder myself, like, but not in EDC stuff as much. So I kind of understand. But sometimes, like, if I just want the flashlight to work or like have a certain form factor or certain
True. True.
features, like I'm willing to pay a little bit more and then be kind of or
Convenience.
not have access. Yeah, exactly. It's the convenience thing. If I can't replace the battery, oh well. But I get all this other stuff. But it seems like for enthusiast circles, they really like
There's
want full control of everything.
and there's also the disposability factor. Like eventually that night core is gonna, like all lithium ion battery based things, it's going to lose its capacity down to where it's unusable anymore. Versus like the HES I held up earlier, this one, this has been in the same design for almost 20 years now. And
Mm,
an HTS from 20 years ago, or around 20 years ago, would still work today because all you need to do is replace the battery for it. And it's still every
yeah.
other functionality, every other aspect of it, the build quality is going to last you the next 20 years. So there's also that factor of disposability that a lot of enthusiasts don't like. They want total value, including lifetime of a product, I think is also a factor there.
Hmm.
Yeah. You
Go ahead.
can't hot swap a battery on something with a built-in. battery. Meaning, if this runs out of battery, I have to wait and charge it before I can use it again. Versus if you have a flashlight with a replaceable battery, pop it out with a freshly charged 18650 battery, and you're good to go full charge
Yep.
again. Yeah. So that's the other thing.
I will get nerdy here for once.
Mm.
I mod Game Boys. That was like my pandemic hobby, and there's like kind of a similar debate between just putting in like nickel metal hydride AA batteries that you just pull off the charger, put that in your Game Boy, versus doing an entire mod with a lithium ion USB-C rechargeable thing. Everyone wanted the USB-C rechargeable, and then I had the stance of like, nah, bro, because when that's dead, you don't get to play anymore. Like you have to sit there for hours and wait for it to charge. You just plop in fresh pair of double A's. So I understand that.
Did you ever? Okay, just a sidetrack. Did you ever own a Game Gear, the old Sega Game Gear? Because that
Where is he going with this?
no
Who's
that
letting him cook?
that thing I think ran on 6 AA, and it chewed through it in like 45 minutes. So it's like I can see where some of those people from on the Game Boy side are coming
Sure.
from, where they don't want to relive having to use 4 AAAs on a DMG Game Boy and then like having to replace it in 30 minutes and stuff like that. So I can see where they're coming from.
Yeah, and for me, again, like as far as flashlights go, I would prefer just the lithium ion that I have to plug in every once in a while,
Hmm.
just for portability, like you mentioned. Like
Yeah.
lithium ion batteries are smaller; I can keep it on my keychain, and it's more important for me to just have a flashlight at the
Mhm.
ready than using it for an extended period of time. It runs out of battery, and I still need to use it. That's just not a use case that I run into often. Uh,
So that's a good point. People should consider how you're going to actually be using a flashlight, because if it's inconvenient to you, whether in size or in interface or in the availability of how you use the power, like if you have to go to the grocery store every time to buy new batteries, you're not going to use that flashlight all the time, or it's not going to be useful for
yeah.
you when you find out that you are on your last battery and you needed a flashlight. That's just not going to do. So it's finding that perfect flashlight that ticks all of those three boxes from the very start: the battery, the brightness that you need, and the interface that's useful for you. I think figuring that out, plus the budget and the size, of course, is the key to finding the perfect backup to your phone flashlight and finding the perfect
Mhm.
flashlight for you. Yeah.
So I'm noticing a common thread here in our discussion of enthusiast level gear. And it seems to be that no matter what it is, whether it's like a knife or a flashlight, whatever, it always comes down to what is good for me. What is personally good for me?
Nah, bro,
And
it's what Instagram says is the best flashlight.
okay,
It's got to be a Reaver
true.
Citadel or an Okluma. No, seriously. Yeah.
Dude, well, okay, look, the algorithm knows me better than I know myself. So from now on, I will just trust what Instagram tells me is best for me. In all seriousness, there is some similarities in the flashlight enthusiast world where people want to like drill down on this customizability, this value, all that sort of stuff, uh, and like lifetime longevity. And they want it for the long haul, and on that journey of them kind of like figuring out what they want out of their flashlight and having the control and means to do that themselves. I think that's really interesting. And you'll
Mhm.
start seeing flashlights that are like modded by people to have, the LED that they want in there that has a certain kind of spec or arrangement or output or whatever. And that's cool. Like, not everyone is gonna get there again. But I think it's just very interesting that the rabbit hole goes that deep. Personally, I don't think I'll ever get there.
Mm. I want to just go a little bit deeper, actually. I mentioned it in passing earlier, but I think if we don't mention it on a flashlight episode, we're gonna get roasted for it. So there's
Okay.
two main factors on the enthusiast side, just to show people what it's really like on the super deep end. Two factors here. I don't know if you have any comments about it, but the tint and a particular interface called Anduril, Anduril, however they pronounce it from
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings. Yeah,
I think it's Anduril. Yeah.
Anduril. Yeah, okay. So tint. What are your thoughts on tint? Because this is usually where you start, leaving the cool tint as a boy and becoming a neutral tint as a man type discussion
All right.
starts.
I am not gonna. claim that I'm an enthusiast in this way, but I can appreciate differences in tint and CRI. So
Mhm.
I
I
will
can
try
demonstrate.
to I will try to basically explain, but um, tint is just basically like what is the color of the light that comes out, because not
Mm.
all the time is it pure white. And
Mm.
sometimes you don't want pure white anyway. And back in the day, you would get flashlights that, depending on the LED used, okay, Mikey is like shining himself with two flashlights of different tints to
Yeah.
illustrate this point. Thank you. But back in the day, you would get a flashlight and like you turn it on and it's like mostly purple, not white. Or you
Mm.
turn one on, it's mostly green, not white.
Mhm.
And before LEDs, you turn it on, it's orange, bro. It's
Yeah.
incandescent, right?
Incandescent.
Yeah. So maybe we're
Like
dating ourselves, but
filament.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But you can also imagine this like in your house. Maybe you have different lights around the house, or like different lamps.
Mm.
Maybe in your kitchen or in your garage or something, it's going to be like a harsh, cool white. But then maybe in the living room or in the bedroom, it's like a warmer, yellower light that's a little bit more relaxing.
There's
So
also this
those are
whole there's also this whole thing in a workspace, right? Some offices like that cool, sterile white light, and some say that it's more productive and friendlier if it's a bit warmer. So there's whole
mm,
light psychology and light reaction for people, depending at like a warmer light can also set the mood to be more relaxed and makes you a bit more lazy. So some offices like harsh white light so people can focus and be alert and more.
yeah, and just destroy their sleep hygiene and
Exactly. Yeah,
that kind
perfect.
of thing. Yeah. To bring it back to flashlights, there's the tints, there's a preference in like what kind of color you see, because if you're going to be spending a lot of money for something to output light, like you kind of want to enjoy what you're looking at. And
Mm.
another aspect of this that actually has less of a subjective preference, color rendering index. We mentioned this earlier, CRI. Um, and this is just how accurately colors look under that light as compared to, as far as I know, the actual sun, like
Mhm.
what actual sunlight would render the color of something to look like. And this is useful, especially in outdoor applications where there's lots of different colors like greens and browns, reds that
It
kind
can
of
get
need
muddled together.
differentiation.
Yeah.
Yeah, versus say if you're like in an urban environment where it's all just like concrete and steel, it's just like a bluish light is probably going to be fine. You're not missing out on much visual information.
Yeah.
Um, I personally go for the higher CRI, and this may be just from like having some background in photography. It just like helps me see things like more accurately to the color. Um,
Mhm.
but I don't care too much other than that. Like if there's an option between cool white and more lumens, or neutral white or like high CRI and fewer lumens, because that is one of the trade-offs, I will choose the higher color rendering index with lower lumens because I don't need that many lumens.
Yeah. I used to be a tint snob also and always go for neutral white and always go for the meta of like a Nichia 219C or whatever the older enthusiast LEDs. But I've started to care about it less. I can appreciate something that's also just crazy bright and has a long runtime, regardless of whether or not it has a cool white tint or an enthusiast lower CCT tint. But I also
Mm-hmm.
I can appreciate like what this light I was holding up I was using to compare. This is using a special, I think it's a 319C. This is made by 47s, and Jason, the owner of, of Prometheus Lights, who owns 47s, is a bit of a flashlight nerd himself. So he has some of access to some cutting edge LEDs. Like I haven't seen this particular LED on this light in anything else. He's the only
Yeah,
one
not
who
gonna
uses
lie,
it.
I didn't even know that that's a thing, bro.
Yeah. So this is a
Okay,
higher, I think this is a 97 plus CRI light. So I like keeping
okay,
this one of these handy
yeah.
just to compare against my cool whites. But you know, I haven't cared about tint in a long time. I just appreciate flashlights as a whole. I would prefer if it's rotary more than anything, and a particular battery types to my preference, which is CR123. But other than that, I love flashlights as a whole. I like
Mm-hmm.
the really big ones. I like the keychain sized ones. I just like all flashlights. It's where both of us got started, right? You are also,
Yeah,
yeah. So
a
to bring it back to you,
flashaholic on candle power forums.
to
Yeah,
bring it back to you, you were the one who discovered and introduced 47s to me, and yeah, come full
yeah.
circle. We're back to 47s now in 2023.
Yeah, I had a Quark. Mini 123 and a
Ah, they're so
Preon,
good.
like freaking really old stuff.
Mm.
I wish I kept them. I don't know if they're still around.
The minis were so good. The full knurling and CR123 size. Oh, those are so good. He never brought those back. Those are so good.
I can understand they had some limitations, but anyway,
Mhm.
enough reminiscing
Yeah.
from these two old guys. Do we want to talk about Anduril operating interface
Ooh, we
or
should. I think we should. So
okay? Say your piece. I have nothing to say here. I think.
yeah, I'm gonna probably a hot take and probably gonna get burned for it, but I don't particularly like it. The so to describe it to people who don't know what it is, it's a advanced programmed interface for electronic switch lights programmed by somebody named Toy Keeper, and she made this as a result of being bored with, or not bored, sorry, to look to have more potential out of flashlights with a simple one switch interface. And the way she coded this, it can get super complex and also super interesting at the same time. It has a ramping interface at the basic level, meaning you can control the brightness. It gets brighter and softer based on how long you hold the button of the light. But through a sequence of button presses, you can get stuff to like party modes where it has different flashing brightnesses. It has a candlelight mode. It has like a thunderstorm mode. It has so many things. It has electronic lockouts. It has, you can control the brightness at every level. You can have it stepless or stepped brightness levels. So it's completely complex if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm,
Anduril
mm-hmm.
people are going to say, bro, you can set it to muggle mode and have it be simple ramping mode and it can be usable by anybody. Sure, but I don't even want to go do that. I just want press a button, twist knob, light turn on. That's probably as far as my interest goes as far as
Uh
interfaces
huh.
go. Yeah.
Okay, so it kind of reminds me of people like rooting an Android phone or like
Mm,
jailbreaking an iPhone, and
that's
you just get
exactly it.
like at a software level, like
Yeah.
you unlock a bunch of new functionality, but it just makes things more complicated, and you have to like do it yourself.
Yeah.
And not everyone needs that or wants that.
Yeah. But for those, I can appreciate that you can buy a $7 flashlight like the Convoy or the most popular one, the Workus TS10. Very affordable light, very bright for its size, and it comes with, and it's one of the cheapest ways to get into Anduril before you get into the MSR enthusiast lights. And for your money, the bang for your buck you get out of a completely programmable, super enthusiast level, play with it as much as you want, like functionality. Man, if you really want to
Hmm.
geek out about flashlights, that's the way to go, I think. And I appreciate that. It's
Cool.
just not for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bottom line.
So, okay, so we're kind of wrapping up this episode now. If we had those two recommendations for the beginner who's just getting a flashlight,
Mhm.
Streamlight, MicroStream USB, right?
Mhm.
And then if you want to just dip your toes in the budget enthusiast world, then Convoy S2
Convoy S2 Plus or the Workhorse TS10. Those
TS10.
two. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So there you go. I think you could probably just buy all three for less than $50 and just
Sure.
like go nuts and see what works for you, right?
Exactly.
Um, cool. So let's just recap. I think a few key things to take away from here. Batteries are important and they can be dangerous. So probably just stick to a single battery in a light or a proprietary USB rechargeable thing.
Yes.
And if you had to choose, probably go with lithium.
Mhm.
Primary if you want good performance and less complexity.
Mhm.
Ion if you want slightly less runtime, but the convenience of being able to recharge it most likely. And then
Mhm.
understand that there is some maintenance you have to think about when using one. It's
Mhm.
a little bit complicated. Then we talked about output, and usually that's lumens, and that more lumens isn't always better. Most people could probably get by with around 50 to like 100 max, and you're good. And don't undervalue the utility of few lumens, like less than one, for specific use cases where you don't need a lot of light or too much light is disruptive. And then think the last thing we touched on was user interface. Sometimes simpler is better, but if you want that customizability on the enthusiast end, then you can look into that Anduril sort of operating system or UI.
Mhm.
So if you made it this far, you must love flashlights. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion. And if you did, please subscribe. And if you're listening through a podcast service and you just really enjoy what we do here, please consider leaving a review and a positive rating, as it would really help the show. You can follow us on social media for more content daily on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all of that. It will be linked below. And if you want to be a part of our EDC community of Flashaholics, feel free to hop into our Facebook group or Discord server for more real-time discussion with other EDCers. And lastly, if you have any feedback for us, questions you want answered on the show, you can shoot us an email at podcast@everydaycarry.com. And that's wrapping it up here. Thank you for listening to Carry the Way. I'm Bernard.
And I'm Mikey. Party on, party mode, woo!
Okay. And until the next one, peace.
Bye.